Hey guys, welcome back to Digital Snipers. So, the prophecy is spoken, and I'm just kidding about that, by the way. But earlier, I made a video about how nines are new tens, and with how things are going to PSA and how there's so many recent news about PSA grading, and not necessarily positive news. I think a lot of people are starting to change their mind about chasing PSA 10s. Okay, and I mentioned before, all this news came about how I felt as a collector, especially with a digital set, that a lot of tens weren't really PSA 10 worthy. And before all this, grading scandal and whatever, I felt that the grading was very inconsistent, and sometimes you kind of felt that sometimes certain cards were graded by someone that was less experienced. But the problem is between the nines and tens, you're paying for a much higher premium for a 10. And as a collector, what do you do when you see a nine that looks like a 10, but you see a 10 that looks like an 8? Okay, and I'm now more leaning towards buying a nine that looks like a 10 rather than spending that premium and buying that slab or label. So, um, yeah. What do you guys feel? I mean, have you guys changed your mind about chasing after tens, or maybe have you even decided to go with a raw collection? Okay, I do both, but with my graded set, it's mainly eights, nines, and tens. Okay, and of course, tens being my biggest chase. But I think recently I've kind of changed my mind and sort of convinced myself that really a lot of the nines just look a lot better in terms of the high eye appeal. I've seen a lot of tens that look horrible, right? Like front and back centering, chipped edges, corner dings, and these are things that you don't see with modern cards, or I should say, you don't see with a lot of even like '90s baseball cards. And so I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with. Um, Maybe is it just with this digital set? Well, I collect other cards as well, but it seems like there's more of a kind of a inconsistent grading with PSA 10s with this set. But let me know what you think about that. But I definitely think that you can expect a tiny spike in price with PSA 9s in the near future. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is there was a post on Sports Card Nonsense about top loaders and card savers. And I just want to talk about what I prefer. Okay. Now, I have a lot of these card savers, and I think I've like a box lying around too, like brand new, but I never use them. And this is just my own preference. I've always been a top loader guy, and I just feel that it's a lot more safer for my cards to be in a top loader. These card savers feel a bit flimsy. Sure, I mean, if you're the only person handling your cards, that shouldn't be a big problem. You're not letting your kids bending them or whatever. However, I just feel like these are a bit more sturdy, and while there is a bit of flex with top loaders as well, but it's not as much as a card saver. And these are already the smaller ones. If you have like the largest size card savers, the flex is actually a little bit bigger. But anyway, so that's one reason, and the other reason is I think for storage. Sure, I mean the card savers are thinner, but they're also a lot bigger in terms of, like I said, this is already the smaller size card savers. But length and width wise, they're a lot smaller too. The top loaders, so I find it a lot easier to find. Whether it's boxes or even shoe boxes, wherever you're able to fit more with the top loaders. But of course, you could argue, well, that shouldn't be right because this being thinner, the card savers being thinner, you should be able to fit more with the card savers. Well, like I said, that's just my opinion. Now, the third reason why is because I love using top loader binders, okay? And especially with the set, because, you know, there's a lot of cards in the set, and if you have it in a box, it's kind of hard to enjoy your cards, you know, in a box. You have to take them out and just kind of, you know, go through them one by one, a couple stacks at a time. But with a top loader binder, and I can't really show you my binder because it's quite large, but I'll give you a bit of a peek here. Yeah. So this is a top loader binder, and I just love using these. It's quite large. This one fits, I think, 504 cards. So basically, two binders will fit a Desert Shield set. And I'm a junk wax Sierra guy, and so when I was a kid, I flipped through my upper deck baseball cards in a binder, and that's something I really enjoy, and something I still enjoy today. You know, looking through my Desert Shield set over a cup of coffee, carefully. um, but you know, it's a lot easier to enjoy your collection in a top loader binder. So I'll post where I bought this, and yeah, if you're a binder guy, go and get yourself a top loader binder. You'll definitely love it. And you know, they're not expensive, great quality, by the way. At least the one that I bought. So I'm not vouching for any other brands, but the one that I bought, the zipper's great, the quality of the binder's great, the pages feel very sturdy. So go ahead and get yourself a top loader binder if you're a binder guy. Now, the other thing about I want to talk about is raw versus graded. Okay, and this is more about if you're collecting as an investment. Now, I find that I enjoy collecting both, to be honest. And as a collector, I enjoy chasing for the higher grades. You know, chasing for that perfect card. But the raw also satisfies me because it's easier to collect in a way, especially if you kind of, you know, you're not too picky about the condition. And I don't mean that you're buying cards that look damaged or whatever, but you're not chasing after something that's really, really near mint. Okay. Eye appeal wise, I look for something that's near mint, but realistically, I'm just buying, you know, something that I know will probably grade a 5, 6, or 7. However, return wise, to be honest, I do think it's actually a smarter investment to buy a raw card as long as you know what you're looking for and you know how to detect a fake counterfeit digital card. Now, the reason why I say this is because, you know, when you're buying a PSA 10, let's just say like this Ken Patterson here. I don't remember how much I paid for this, but I think it was a ballpark $100. Now, if you want to make money off of this card, sure, you can list it for 150, and someone may buy it for 150, but the chances of that is quite slim because most likely they'll just look at the comps, and the comps will say that this card was last sold for 100, and they'll probably try to lowball you at 80. Um, and you know, the only reason why you will probably make a profit on this card is until, you know, the next comp goes up, or all of a sudden, you know, those shield cards are in higher demand and all the cards go up, and that will happen as well. But the thing is, you know, like I said, the chances of making money off of a raw card is higher because now this Vince Coleman here is a difficult card to find in really good shape, whether it's raw or graded. Okay, try finding a Vince Coleman PSE 9, let's just say, on eBay. It's quite impossible at the moment. And if you do, please let me know. So you know, this card as a base card or a base common, you know, usually the Desert Shield cards will run from $3 to $5. But I think I paid $20 for this card, And that's because I want to look for a card that is in pretty good shape, that's pretty well centered, not necessarily gem mint quality. But as you can see, this card, it's a tad bit off centered, but it still looks pretty good, um, eye appeal wise, front and back. So the thing is, there's not a lot of these cards floating around. And so I'm pretty sure the seller knows this, and that is why they marked it up to $20. And I've seen this card for like 30 as well, and people still buy them up because of the fact that there's not a lot of these floating around. Now, if you are able to buy these cards in lots, or you're able just to source, let's just say this Vince Coleman for, something like less than $10, let's say, or $10, let's just say, and you're able to sell the card for $20 to $30, that's a 200 to 300% return. Now, on the other hand, if you were to buy this Ken Patterson for $100 and you were aiming to do, to get the same return, that's quite difficult because of the fact that it's graded and the comps are very transparent. And so for you to sell this card that you bought for $100 for $200 or $300, first of all, you'll need to find a buyer that's very desperate to have a Ken Patterson PSA 10. Or I'll tell you one reason why that could happen, and that is that either that it has a very, very low gem rate, or that the supply of these PSA 10s don't pop up that often. Okay, and I'll give you an example of something like that that may occur and that has a high gem rate. Well, not a high gem rate, but a decent amount of PSA 10s in the PSA registry, and that's the Cal Ripken base card. Okay, I think there's like over 50, which is not a low number, but I think overall we'll see that card continue to surge. So, but I think in general, though, if you're a investor or a flipper, I would definitely go with a raw card. Um, as long as there's, you know what you're looking for, okay, and hopefully you won't stumble upon counterfeit cards. But let me know what you feel. Do you think the raw cards are a better investment, or do you think the graded cards are a better investment? Okay, so now that we're talking about raw cards, let's this stash or this lot here came in a couple days ago. Like I said, I'm not looking for gem mint cards or gem mint quality cards. I know for a fact that most of these will probably grade like a PSA 6, maybe. But eye appeal wise, what I'm looking for is the centering, corners and edges, and also decent foil on the shield, and the back centering too. Like, I mean, I don't like. I mean, I know a lot of people say the back centering doesn't matter as much, but if it's too off center, it does bother me. So basically, you'll see that with the majority of the cards that I buy raw, the centering is quite good. So yeah, and a lot of these, they're not expensive. Around like $4 or $5. Maybe the first four here, and due to the reason I mentioned just now, the Fred McGriff is obviously the pricier one because it's a Hall of Famer. But with the Mariana Duncan, the Vince Coleman, and even the Chris Sabo, actually, they're not that easy to find in good shape or well centered. So the Vince Coleman is actually pretty hard to find in general. So cars like these usually cost a bit more, and that's where sellers have the upper hand to mark up as much as they like, because if they come across a collector that's looking for a really good high eye appeal raw, they'll pay that premium to get that card. And so, but anyways, let me know what you feel about raw cards versus graded Desert Shield cards. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is recently Ken Golden was on CNBC, and he mentioned how, and I quote, that sports cars are now an alternative asset class. So what does that mean? I mean, should we now all like put all our money into sports cars because now that Ken has kind of told us that it's we're the investment, all our cards are going to go up. Now, first of all, I want to know, for someone that kind of invests on all sorts of things. Um, Not all investments are rewarding. Okay, whether it's stocks or property or art, some investments fail miserably. Okay, you can buy a home and you can have no buyers for the home after you bought it, or no offers for your home after you bought it. And some stocks, they get delisted, or that the prices go up and then they crashes, etc. So the same thing will happen with cards as well. So for a lot of you younger collectors, or newer collectors, I should say, not necessarily younger, um, if you think that this hobby is going to explode and so you're buying all these cards, you got to be very careful, because not all cards will go up. And in fact, I have a big box of cards that I thought would be worth a lot of money today back in the 90s, and they're really worth less than the top loaders they're in. So be selective. I definitely feel that prospecting is not a good way to um, curate your collection, or maintain your investment, because a lot of the prospects fail miserably. And I think if you're into modern cards, you'll see that recent years, a lot of prospects didn't really pan out. So it's like buying blue chip stocks, right? Like, it's don't be afraid to buy a stock after, or a card after the prices have surged slightly. For example, let's say Shohei Ohtani. Um, is it a bad investment now? I don't think so. I think his cards will continue to be in very, very high demand, and you'll see more and more of his cards breaking new highs. And so it's in such a case with such a player, it's actually not a dumb idea to buy his cards in recent years, rather than back in 2017, or even earlier in 2013 and 14 if you chase for his Japanese cards. Um, but meanwhile, if you're prospecting, a lot of those cards, it's just basically like buying, smaller AI companies now, and you're putting money into every single AI company. And if you remember back in the internet bubble back in 2000, I, I I'm not exactly sure about the numbers, but I'm sure at least like 80 to 90% of these internet companies went out of business. And sure, you may have ended up with Google or Microsoft or whatever, and that made you, a bit of money. But if the distribution of your funds, a majority of it didn't go to those companies and went to the ones that went down, then your investment would have failed miserably. I think in the long run, you got to remember, despite the fact that these cards have value and they could be an investment, you still have to collect like a true collector. And, in order for your collection to grow in a healthy way. And I'm not saying that you can't make big money with cards. And obviously, with shows like Golden and whatever, you see a lot of people that are making a lot of money with cards. But I think I'm just speaking on behalf of small time collectors like me. And when I mean small time, I mean like I'm not bidding on these golden 100s or these heritage auctions. I'm just doing your regular eBay bidding and buying online from time to time. I think we don't go too crazy. If you can afford it, that's great. I'm already the type that's kind of risky. Like sometimes when I see a card, recently I bought a big card, and it was a pretty big card for me. I'm willing to spend that kind of money on certain cards that I see that has a lot of potential, but not on every single card that I come by. I definitely take the time to um, you know, decide and plan on what's my strategy after I've acquired that card. So I think for most collectors, don't get too excited now that Ken has kind of, first of all, that's just his opinion. And we're still waiting to see whether or not a lot of the fun guys will start to come in to this hobby and start buying out a lot of the cars. But you got to remember one thing too. If all of a sudden, companies like Goldman Sachs or BlackRock or whatever start, getting their hands on baseball cards, I'm pretty sure they're going after the high end stuff. Okay, and not necessarily a Vince Coleman PSA 10. Okay, even though the PSA 10s aren't cheap. So while their investment will definitely drive up the hobby, you still really need to be careful and not to go too crazy about buying high-end cards. At the end of the day, I think one of the problems I see that may end up um, a bubble or whatever is the fact that there's a lot of cards out there, and there's a lot of different types of manufacturer scarcity. And we saw back in 2021 when a lot of the investors, okay, I should say, are flippers, all of a sudden decided to pull out and the prices started to drop, especially basketball cards. And this could happen again with collectibles, okay, especially now we're seeing that money coming in. If we do see that money coming in from the big funds, that's the pump, right? And when what happens is when the prices go up, guess what? The first one to exit the hobby will be also the people with the money, the fun guys. And when they exit, it's not like they're slowly selling their cards, they'll just pump and dump. And that's when, that 1993 junk wax era situation happens all over again. But I don't think it will exactly, if that situation happens, it won't exactly happen like it did in 93 because there's a lot of manufacturer scarcity. And certain cars like an Otani 1 of 1, will always have its value. And I think Ken's dead on about how certain items in the hobby, like the Mickey Mantle rookies, the 52 Mantles, or the Jackie Robinson, or or the Shoeless Joe Jackson. These cards have never really gone down in value, and these cards have only gone up one transaction after another. Okay, so for you guys that are trying to create a collection and not necessarily think of um, think of baseball cards in general as an investment, I think that it's important to streamline your collection. Okay, and collect. Like for me, I've been doing that since 2023. Okay, and now I'd say I'm probably like 90% focused on industrial set. And once in a while, I'll come across like a vintage card that I really want. But I'm mainly focused on the set, and I also have a system on how much I can buy on a monthly basis on the set, just so that I don't go too overboard. Um, and the reason why I say this is because by streamlining your collection and having a system, you force yourself to really do the research and find out what set is worth your time and money and will have good value, over the long run, and not just buy anything that you feel is has collectability, or what some people tell you have collectability, right? And like for example, like a flawless card. Okay, sure, there's a lot of collectability in that, but if you think about it, all flawless cards are manufacturer scarcity. And in theory, to be honest, the Desert Shield set is also a manufacturer scarcity. But um, I'm not comparing these two, but I'm just saying, at the end of the day, if the market ever crashes, you want to be holding a collection that you want to hold on to and you don't mind holding on to for another 20, 30 years. And because I've been hearing a lot of YouTubers saying how they want to sort of slim out their collection or sell out parts of their collection because they've realized they bought too much. And a lot of these cards don't really excite them anymore. And while they're happy to have them, it doesn't bring them a lot of emotional value to their collection. And it's sad to hear that because it's obvious that they spent too much. And it's obvious that, they've changed their mind about certain cards they've acquired. And so that's why I've been quite happy with the fact that I've kind of, earlier on, I've decided that the Shield set was my set mainly, apart from certain collections that I also collect as well. But um, with the other collections, because of the fact that they're kind of pricey, first of all, and second of all, a lot of those cards don't come by that often. I'm able to control that side of collecting and limit the purchases there to very, very minimal. I'm talking about like maybe just one or two purchases a year. So, yeah. So I think, while Ken is definitely correct with certain things, like, how um, I do see cards being a credible asset class, and how, the market has changed. People in maybe 30, 40 years ago would probably invest in fine art and so forth. But this newer generation of people um, are showing appreciations for different types of products that have value. And it's not just baseball cards, too. Maybe it's comics or other types of collectibles. So, but the fact that with baseball cards, there's such a long history, and not to mention, it's quite mature in terms of the hobby in different parts of the world. I do feel that it's quite ready to be a alternative asset class, like Ken said. So let me know what you think. Leave me a comment below. Please like and subscribe my channel. I really appreciate it. And thanks for watching.